All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Systems of Wealth podcast. I believe this is number 4. I am your host, Noah Kronfly, and today I am joined by a very special guest, someone that I've been looking forward to interviewing here for some time, someone that I consider to be a friend, a mentor, an advisor, someone that has had a very big impact in a short amount of time since we've known each other, Rob. So I really appreciate that. So thank you, Rob. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for having me. And when you told me you wanted to have this conversation, like I wasn't gonna say no. Let's do
Well,
this.
I appreciate it. You have been someone that, like, just right off the bat, I like to start by just saying thank you, dude. Like, you really have had such a big impact on me and my definition and how I perceive entrepreneurship and what it could be for me specifically. And so that's just something that I am very, very, grateful for, just getting to know you and build a relationship with you. So for anybody that is uninitiated on your long, illustrious career, can you just give a quick background on you, who you are, and what you're working on at this point?
Yeah, no, of course. So I have a long, windy background, as I'm
Mhm.
sure most entrepreneurs do. And really, my entrepreneurial endeavors started back when I was in college, and would just try to get businesses off the ground. I've had like an info marketing business that I started and made some money, and then didn't know what to do with. I like didn't know how to scale, didn't know how to do anything with it. It was
Yeah.
like all right, here's money. What do I do now? I have helped small businesses in my early 20s. Joined a CrossFit gym and helped that grow from. I wasn't an equity holder in it, but we had 3 members when I joined, and then we grew that thing to about $500,000 in revenue.
Okay.
And then I ended up going from there and starting my own gym, and that was like my really first successful concrete entrepreneurial endeavor, where I went, raised a little bit of money, just
Hmm.
investment, and then within the course of 2 months, well, it was a year for us to get the whole thing up and running, but within 2 months we opened 2 facilities. One in Washington D.C., like the heart downtown, and then one outside in the burbs where I live.
Okay.
And that went really well. We were growing like crazy. This was back in
Nice.
2015.
Okay.
And then I ended up selling my equity in that about 18 months in. And the reason for that was just my partner and I didn't see eye to eye,
Hmm.
and we didn't see eye to eye on what it would take for us to go where I thought we both wanted to go, and maybe we saw differently about where we wanted to go.
Okay.
That was a big eye opener for me in terms of what it understanding, one, the importance of having really good partners, and then two,
Hmm.
making sure that you guys are on the same page to what you work with, and three, like what it means to be the difference between a practitioner and a business owner and entrepreneur.
Hmm.
And I had an idea of that going into it, but then when this whole thing came to a head, that was what our battle was all about.
Okay.
She wanted me to be more of a practitioner of the gym, coaching people, coaching classes, being hands on. And we wanted to grow to 3 locations very quickly. We had 2, wanted to go to 3. You don't really start making real money until you get to 4+ locations.
Got it. Okay.
So we wanted to scale this thing, and it's like you can't do it spending 8 to 10 hours a day in the gym coaching.
Right. Coaching. Yeah.
And so again, that really nailed it home for me of like, all right, there is a difference between being a practitioner, which is
Hmm.
nothing wrong with that if that's the path you want to be as an entrepreneur. You want to be a
Yeah.
good gym, or you want to be a really good trainer who opens their own facility, but you're going to spend most of the time doing that. You want to be a marketer, who opens their own agency, but you spend most of your time hands-on marketing. But there's a
Yeah.
difference if you want to scale.
For sure.
So anyway, so sold the gym, sold my equity back to my partner. And then that's when I kind of pivoted into the tech world, worked for an e-commerce backed startup, started my own digital marketing agency. And then eventually circumstances led me to joining a venture capital backed startup called Rise.
Hmm.
Really cool opportunity at the time. And then that kind of led me, after a year there, led me to where I am today, which is I run revenue operations for a private equity backed firm called Lumiverse, and
Got it.
we usually buy software companies and
Yep.
grow them and then sell things.
Fantastic.
So
All
that's
right. Well, that's great. What like, where did you always kind of have like the entrepreneurial like kind of bug and spirit? I know you said like it started in college, but like up until that point, did you have an idea of like this is a viable path for me, or was it like the traditional kind of like I'm going to get a job and kind of do this? Like what was that for you like growing up?
You know, it was never front and center,
Hmm.
because my mom attempted to start her own business back in the day, and
Okay.
she I think it was like database management, like SQL management for larger companies. But and it might even been like IT sales stuff too.
Yeah.
And I remember going on like meetings with her, like sitting in the car while she went on these meetings when I was little,
Hmm.
probably like 5, 6, something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember that, and it didn't really register at the time what was going on. And she
Uh-huh.
had this company called SynCup for a while, but it never was like, it was always a part time thing for her. It was never
Okay.
for Jam. It was like
Yeah.
her full-time thing, right? And so looking back, I might be able to retroactively explain, like, oh yeah, like it runs in the family. Like there was this,
Hmm.
but like it was never at the time. I think it was one of those things where like I was lifeguarding, I was watching like dog sitting, lifeguarding, in high school, waiter, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, this sucks. Like I don't want to, keep trading my time for money. It was just like a
Yes.
conclusion I came to, and maybe I like stumbled across, some like, like it was one of those whole like, how do I get rich things,
Right. Yeah, it's where it starts. It's always where it starts.
right? Like, what's the
Yeah.
best way for me to make more money?
Yes. Right. Of
So then I think like most, well, you and I are from the Perry Marshall world, so a lot of Perry
course.
Marshall people come from the MLM thing. So like I went
Yep.
to a couple meetings for Cutco,
You did. Okay. Yeah. My cousin did Cocoa knives. Yeah.
so I did like two meetings, and I was like, nah, this isn't for me. I'm not doing it. So I didn't end up like getting in full blown to it because like something just felt like not great about it for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it was, but like dabbled in that, and then like I said, I was kind of doing some like side stuff, just trying to like figure it out. So I think it was one of those things that like maybe I had a natural inclination for, but I didn't know how to verbalize it because I didn't have a ton of examples of that around me
Okay.
until in life when I started kind of like falling into it, and then meeting other entrepreneurs and understanding
Right.
what's going on.
So your first sort of, let's call it entrepreneurial endeavor was the info marketing business.
That might have been the first one. So that one specifically it was called Basketball Wad Weekly.
Okay.
So what I did is this was 2011, I think.
Okay.
So I would buy Google Ads,
Yep.
and then direct them towards a landing page where I would buy, or sorry, where I would sell using PayPal, basketball workouts. And
Okay. Yeah. How old were you at the time?
20, this has been 20 or 21, I think.
Wow, dude. Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Amazing. It's
I
amazing.
did that, and like I made a little bit of money. I made like
Yeah.
I was making like $250 a month or something.
All right. Yeah. Start somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, but like what ended up happening is I realized like I didn't like the hands-on work of writing these workouts.
Ah, I
So
see.
then I just like stopped. I was like, I don't know how to, and I don't know how to at the time, like don't know how to delegate.
Yes.
Like I'm looking back on it, I was like burning through a bunch of money on Google Ads. I had
Right.
no clue. Hopefully it's okay. I can curse on here.
Absolutely.
Like no fucking clue what I'm doing. I remember I mentioned this to Perry when I saw Perry Marshall when we were at Roundtable, which is for your listeners a mastermind group that Perry Marshall runs that no
Yep.
one actually met each other at.
Yep.
But I remember telling them like, I had your book back in like your Google Ads book back in like 2008, 2009, 10, somewhere around there. And then I read it, started running these ads. That's what got me to this workout. I was like driving traffic, no idea what I was doing, burned
Yep.
through a bunch of cash that I didn't have at the time. and then, uh, and then like that whole thing, I ended up just shutting it down or just letting it peter out.
Okay.
And then like completely forgot about Perry Marshall and all that. And like 6 years later, I go and buy the book again. And then I was like looking through my my library, and I ended up finding it. I was like, oh man, like I remember.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So when you say like, you didn't quite like the part of writing the workout plans, would you compare that sort of to like, again, the practitioner and the difference of like running the business? Same sort of thing like with the gyms. Like you didn't want to be the coach, sort of like you wanted to kind of operate the business itself.
Yeah, I think that's probably one way to put it.
Yeah.
Also, just my personality type. I am the type of person who likes to put the system in place, but
Hmm.
not be the one who turns the crank on a daily or weekly, whatever basis.
Right.
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 So told to do the same task over and over again, I very quickly fall off. That's not my.
Yeah. She's
I
like,
need
this
to
isn't.
find somebody. I can write up the plan. I can delegate it out to somebody, make sure they do it, and make sure it's done to the spec in which I do it
Uh-huh.
or accomplish. But
Yeah.
it's just not in my personality. I get bored too easily. Like
Yeah. I'm with you.
what's the next thing I got to figure out? That was it. It was just like really hard for me to sit down. There was just like so much friction for me to sit down and write these workouts on a cadence. And like it's not like a time thing. I was in college or
Right.
right. I had all the time in the fucking world, so it wasn't in me to do it. And like today, this day, like I know that about myself, right?
Yeah.
I'll lay the pipe, but like somebody else has to go and make sure that it gets done over and over
Right.
again.
Well,
Right.
that level of awareness at that age obviously is huge. And what's interesting about like the beginning of a entrepreneurial journey or career, in my opinion, like I think the experience that you get from doing something like that and being hands-on obviously is much more valuable at the time than like scaling the business and making a lot of revenue from it. Like the experience that you took from that, obviously, and taking that to the gyms and running it that way obviously played a part in that. But like, what about the gym being like the vehicle of the next business? Like, why going from like running an online business and kind of doing the info marketing and then obviously having in-person like physical retail locations, like what is it about that vehicle that sort of like attracted you as like, okay, this is the business that I want to build? Were you just interested in CrossFit or like in already working out, or yeah, where did that come from?
So I remember, so I played basketball at McDaniel College,
Yep.
like in preschool, and I
Mhm.
was hurt most of the time when I was there.
You and I still have yet to play any basketball together, Rob. We need to do that.
Yes, yes, we do. I
We
haven't
gotta
in
shoot
a
some.
long
We gotta
time.
shoot some hoop.
How it goes. It's one of those like I'm at the age now where my skills are probably still there, but I'm so out of shape, like you could probably never tell. That's the and I'm at the age too where I haven't realized how old I am. So
Yeah, that's dangerous.
guys, like I get really frustrated.
Yeah.
But so when I was at McDaniel, I remember seeing a guy in the gym training somebody else.
Uh-huh.
And this kind of goes back to like, me like doing jobs that I was like, like lifeguarding, whatever. I was like, these all kind of like I don't really like doing this, but I like working
Right.
out. Maybe I'll like training people. And I remember seeing this guy and I was like, oh hey, how do you get into this? And then I remember that nothing ever happened of that. It was probably like a year later or two later where I had just gotten my last knee surgery, was scheduled to get another one that was
Oh shoot.
yeah, it was scheduled to get one in like 2 or 3 months that was going to keep me from walking for about 6 months.
Yeah.
And I remember like hearing about this whole CrossFit thing, and like this if anybody who knows CrossFit, there's kind of like two sides of it. You're either like really obsessed with it, or you think it's the stupidest thing in the world. And anyone who thinks it's like really stupid will usually use like the you're gonna get hurt really
You're gonna
bad.
get hurt. Right. Bad form, jerking around. Yeah, of course.
Exactly. So I was like, well, shit, I'm getting knee surgery and I'm going to be laid up, so I can just hurt the crap out of myself. I have a lot of time to recover.
Right.
So I looked up an affiliate that was near me. At the time, there was only two in my area, and it was called CrossFit Done Right. And so I went to it and joined and started working out. And basically, the journey there was like twofold. One, it was kind of like down this like rabbit hole of interest in the fitness side of things because I ended up not needing the knee surgery when I was taught
Oh.
how to squat properly and my
Mhm.
for the squat and my flexibility improved. My
Yeah.
knee went away.
Oh wow.
I have a quarter size hole in my knee
Oh.
right now. I had my meniscus scoped 5 times, so just like
Jeez.
little snips out of it every single time.
Ay.
And like my knee still swells a little bit, but like
Mhm.
pain is manageable. Like if I were to go, practice, 5 days a week, like I probably wouldn't be able to do it. But like, I don't need to. I sit in front of the computer. I can go play pickup like once a week if I want to, and hold my own. And like,
Right.
right.
Just put me in the corner. Just feed me.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up joining this gym. My knee pain like went away, and so that took me down one side of the rabbit hole, and then this other side was that the gym was growing rapidly. Now, in hindsight, and actually not even hindsight, what I realized a couple years in, because it took us 3 years to grow to a little less than $500,000 in revenue. What I realized was that the owner didn't know what he was doing at all. But we were growing at a crazy clip for a local business.
Right.
A local business that didn't spend $1 on marketing, right?
Right.
And so, and what I realized is that we were just riding the CrossFit wave at the
time.
We were the second gym. By the time we got to our peak, there was like 8 gyms within a mile radius.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I opened my gym. And so what ended up happening is like I saw that we were riding this wave. I actually went to his office. I remember this. I went into his office and asked for, this was maybe 2013, like October 2013, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
Went into the owner's office and asked him for equity in the business.
Okay.
He laughed at me and said no. So I was like, I'm going to start my own gym.
All right.
Right.
Yeah.
At the time too. So, I was with him from the beginning. He had like, again, three people. I don't think in hindsight, I understand, equity much better than I did back then.
Mm-hmm.
I did feel entitled to it. I understand now that, when equity comes down to not only the effort you put in, but the amount of risk that you're putting yourself into when you're starting an endeavor.
Right.
So he has a lot of money that he put into this thing. And, so like, I don't necessarily, if I were to do it again, I'd probably make the same ask.
Mm-hmm.
It probably would actually gone down very similar to how it did at the time. And it was probably good that I didn't understand it because I was pissed.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the gym. I felt like I was entitled to it. He madly didn't give it to me. And we had talked about to a degree of like wanting to scale that business.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it too was the dude opened a separate location and didn't include me in the separate location. So
Got it.
Overall.
Yeah. Screw this guy.
Anything else, right? It was like, all right, I need to make more money. I feel like I've hit my ceiling here.
Yeah.
How can I do that? All right, I need to go separate myself from the employer and do my own thing and be the owner. And that's what's going to take me to the next level here.
Wow. So this is a question that I've always wanted to ask you is like, in those times where you experience, because that ceiling that you felt, like I've felt that at multiple times in like my whatever, short kind of journey and career so far, those that the ability to kind of break through that, and then we'll have the self-awareness that you're hitting your ceiling, but like that awareness of like, okay, I need to go out and like, I asked for equity. He's not going to give it to me. Like, I'm not going to get any ownership in this. So I'm going to go out and do my own thing. Like, was there hesitation with like the risk of going out and doing your own thing? Like, how did you assess that risk? How did you find like the actual, like, cause most people are like, oh, like I'm, it's fine. Like, I'm just going to stay in this position. Then like, how did you go about just being like, you know what, I'm going to go do my own thing? Like, are you investing in mentors? Are you studying? Like, what does that process really look like to have the confidence to go do that?
So I would say a lot of it is ignorance was confidence.
Some self-confidence.
I just resolved to do it.
And yeah, dude, I love that.
Confidence to go do it. And along the way, like, I sought out mentors and I purchased like courses to figure things like I invested in myself to figure it out.
Of course.
It was not a in hindsight, I don't think there was any sort of like risk assessment because like I didn't have a ton of money at the time anyway. So it might not have been like, what's the downside here? And I don't honestly, like, I don't know the timeline of advice and when it was given to me, but I do remember at some point when I decided to take this entrepreneurial journey, I remember coming across something that was basically like, if you're an entrepreneur, like, do it, because the worst case is you can get a job anywhere else, right? Right. What's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is maybe you have like people laugh at you and they're like, oh, you're a failure, blah, blah, blah. And like, once you accept that, then you're like, all right, cool. Like, worst case scenario is I have a good story. And like, these people aren't my friends anyway, so fuck them.
Yes.
And like, I'll go get a job elsewhere. And I think that was very comforting to me to help me take that plunge. I think that's the linear path here. I don't remember 100%. But yeah, like I went and talked to multiple investors, and I picked my investor based on his experience. So I made sure to align myself. I tried to mitigate my risk to a degree, right?
Yes.
I took on equity, not debt. Right. I was given an offer of debt financing from an right. Yeah. And terms were not unreasonable, but I didn't want, that was a level of, all right, I'm going to be on the hook for this money. Right. I brought on an angel investor who had a history of he was a marketer, and I knew that we would need to understand marketing at a high level to do it. So I brought him on because of that. His money was relatively cheap on the equity side. We never get a ton. We did get a better deal than I thought at the time, but it was still a deal I would have cut again, given my circumstance and lack of leverage at the time.
Right.
And like I said, I invested in different courses and stuff. And so and our landlord was a client of ours. So
Okay.
this is one of those things like we've talked about, like being in the right place at the right time, and
Yeah, absolutely.
when it comes around.
Right.
This dude owned multiple buildings in the Washington D.C. area.
Okay.
Was trained by us at the current gym we were at.
Yeah.
Really liked my business partner and myself, and
Okay.
so when and he was our current landlord at CrossFit Done Right, the gym we both started at.
Yeah.
And so when we started engaging in these conversations with him, like we knew that the lease was massive, especially at that time, it was maybe like 500K, for a 3 to 5 year
Ooh.
lease, right? And
Ooh.
so as a 25-year-old, like, oh,
Dude. Yeah.
but we did have a feeling that if we got into trouble, that he would be very reasonable. We weren't going into somebody who was going to basically be like, "You guys,
Yeah.
come
And you're
give us to the cleaners if we defaulted on it."
right.
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 So we did do things to mitigate the risk as we were going through the way. And we got lucky. We got really lucky that we had some of these like the dude that I got the angel investment from was a member of the gym, right? So
Yeah.
there were people, and we built these relationships, and we were just really lucky that we had these relationships built in our network.
Right.
And that could be something we dive into and talk about later.
Yeah. No, I definitely do want to go into that, of
But
course.
yeah, that was huge for us.
That's you know what I find very interesting about that is like because I've it's hard to articulate that and put that into words of like the idea of starting without necessarily an idea or a vision of like what this is like connecting all the dots obviously months down the line of what that's going to look like, but I think obviously like the opportunity and luck like that favors the person that is obviously continuing to show up every day and do something like that. And they're what when I said at the top, like you have helped me reframe almost my vision of what entrepreneurship is or what it could be and the ways to it's not like a specific box that like you put it into. And I think like this is a term that I've used for myself. It's called like the gray area of life, like looking for the things in between the cracks that like will give you a certain sort of leverage or a way to kind of get your foot in the door or just to get started. Because I think we it's funny as as an entrepreneur that we still do it, but like we have a very black and white definition of what entrepreneurship is or what it needs to be, and feeling like, well, I need to like for me, I've had my fair share of partnerships, and obviously you were one of the ones that I went to when my partnership didn't work out last year, and so that's to me is like a way to mitigate risk sometimes is to one be aware of what you're good at in a partnership, but just be able to seek that person out and to kind of share in that together. Like what's your take on partnerships? How do you evaluate somebody that you're actually going to partner up and go into business with?
Yeah. So as I've gone along, I initially, after the, well, actually, I think I tried to do it myself before. So before I brought on my business partner
Yeah.
at our gyms, I tried to go at it by myself.
Okay.
And in the way I'm telling these stories, or maybe the way they're being perceived, and it seems like I had a higher level of awareness at the time. Maybe I had a level of awareness, but it was
You
a
do, and you did.
right? But I wasn't going anywhere. Like what I
Okay.
was trying to do, right? It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
a lot longer. So then, I
Hmm.
engaged with my business partner, and that started speeding things up.
Okay.
And along the way, what I've realized is, I have weaknesses, and
Hmm.
the awareness of those weaknesses is a very big strength for me. And so I
Yeah.
just seek out partners who fill those strengths for me. And I think the
Nice.
mistake or fill my weaknesses and it's their strengths, right?
Right.
And the mistakes I've made,
Hmm.
in finding partners along the way is maybe I think there's been two mistakes and I've had partners that we ended up having to cut ties, and we did it fairly quick because we realized it wasn't going to be a good fit. Is I think one is not understanding or having too close of strengths and weaknesses, and so
Hmm.
things just weren't getting done or moving, or the expectations were different because I might have expected one thing and he expected something else,
Of
and we
course.
just weren't aligned on it because
Right.
we both actually default to the things that we like and are good at, and maybe it
Right.
was too close for
Yeah.
something to be done.
Hmm.
And then I think not. I've had trouble with partners who don't understand what it takes to get something off the ground.
Hmm.
There's like the faux entrepreneurs who haven't failed. Like entrepreneurship to me is an endurance game
Hmm.
where like, and especially nowadays, everybody can get into it. It's very easy to
Right. The barrier to entry, yeah, is so low.
so low,
Yeah.
right? but you're not going to get it right the first time,
Of
most likely,
course.
right?
Right.
And there's all of these like faux entrepreneurs who start a business and then they eventually stop because they realize how much work it is, and it
Right.
wasn't that they have this innate like I want to be entrepreneur or business owner. It's this is the cool thing to do, or
Yeah.
like or I like hey I want the money thing, and
Yeah.
this is the best way to get money. But
Right.
then when
You don't realize how much you bleed before the money shows up. Yeah.
exactly. So I've also butted heads with people who didn't understand the level of work that it took.
Yeah, for sure.
So then when things weren't moving as quickly or things got hard, they were just like deuces, I'm out. And I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
I'm glad you realize it, and I wish we'd realized it before, but
Right.
it's not easy to get started.
No. And it's okay. Like again, like going back to like you helped me almost just like redefine what like my life and what my career could be is just being like, I need to just play the game that like fits and suits me the best and only needs to make sense to me. And it doesn't have to because like it's just not going to like what my journey is and what yours is and what your superpowers are and what mine are different. And like our roles that we play, the type of projects that we attract are always going to be different. Like what do you feel like is what's your superpower? Like what are the roles in certain projects that like you look for that like you feel like you flourish the best in?
So I've been told that I have like an innate ability to see the forest for the trees.
Nice.
And
Yes.
when people, and I think my biggest strength is being able to look at the picture and zoom out at, the 20,000 foot view, but then
Yeah.
also zoom in and say, all right, now that we see the whole picture, here's where we need to address within that picture.
Right.
And so, I mean, I think strategically, I'm pretty strong at it. I think that's one of my suits, one of my strong suits. And then I really think another one is just, which I've worked at over time, and I think is becoming a pretty strong suit for me is delegation.
Mm-hmm.
I've really started to
Glad you
understand.
brought this up. Yep.
Yeah, I really started to understand like how to effectively communicate with the people that I'm working with, and asking people what to do, and making sure that people are doing what they're best suited for. That's been
Mm-hmm.
something over the last couple of years that I've really focused on. Is like I would, there was kind of two times that I'd be failing when working with other people, and one is if my ask was not clear enough for
Yep.
them, and the second would be if my ask didn't align with something that they were naturally good at, right?
Uh,
And so, it
mm.
made me, there are times where I'm like, all right, and I had to figure out why. All right, this thing, like I am asking this thing beautifully, in terms of like, this is the outcome that I want. Here's a
Yes.
step-by-step process for you to do it. And like all of
Right.
this still wouldn't get done, or didn't get done the way it needed to get done. It's okay. Like maybe this just isn't your jam, and let me go find another thing for you to do. Right.
Right. Right.
And I've found that a lot of times people will just write off other people,
Mm-hmm.
versus depending on the situation you're in, right? Sometimes it's just like I need, somebody to do this job, and if you can't do it, there's no other place for you here.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times, what I'll say is like, all right, this isn't working out for you. Here's some other things that could get us to the end goal that we're still working towards, and I think this stuff might be better for you to do. So,
Mm.
yeah, and see if this works for you.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And I talked about this, I think, earlier this week about a lot of business owners, especially early on, a lot of entrepreneurs, and even later in the game, you just don't have access to unlimited resources.
Right.
So you need to, in order to get, to continue to level up and get where you want to go, you need to figure out how to get more out of the people you do have access to, given the resources you have available. And that's been a big, again, focus of mine. I think a big strong suit of mine of late that I've really been trying to nail down.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've always observed out of you of like your ability to like mobilize troops and come back to a point of like, what's actionable? What are we going to execute on? What are we going to delegate? Like, it's something that I've struggled a lot with, and something that I've observed of other entrepreneurs of like, I know for me, like the levels that I've experienced so far, and I'm curious to know if like if it's the same, but like the original ceiling that I hit was when I was trying to do everything all on my own. Like I wanted to own it and control it. And I feel like what as I've observed this, and I haven't done it yet, but like to go from sort of like a six-figure entrepreneur or running a six-figure business and getting sort of that seven figures and beyond, it's to me, it's attracting talent and mobilizing that talent the right way, like getting the most out of that talent, which is a much different skill set of going from the person that is like doing everything to relinquishing control a bit and putting other people in place. And almost like what I've found is getting the most out of somebody else ultimately pushes you forward, right? Like it forces you to continue to level up and do that. But like, how do you how did you and how does one sort of work that muscle of delegation? Like, where did that come from? From you? Did you have like somebody that like showed you the ropes? Did you like again kind of go back to books and courses? Where did that come from?
Yeah, a lot of it was trial and error. There are two resources that kind of pop out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Really, one is Josh Long's book,
Yep.
Bottleneck Breakthrough.
Yep.
And so he talks in there. There's a section in there
I
about
got that on that bookshelf somewhere.
yeah, bookshelf. But he talks in there somewhere about I forget what the section was, but he has a framework that he used, and he talks about get on a call like once a week with your people, especially if you're at a business at a certain point working with freelancers, and go and you get like a template that you go through to make sure.
Nice.
And I remember that, and and then what was his name, Tim, and Perry Marshall guy who
Tim
does
Francis.
Tim Francis, yeah.
Yep.
So I forget how I ended up getting to his stuff, but he had some resources as well because he's got that
Like the VA hiring.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
great assistant, I think.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so he has great assistant, and he's got some resources. They might be like super secret resources that you can only get through Perry Marshall stuff. He has some resources on like his frameworks for doing it.
Nice.
And so I think between I've had a VA for maybe like 4 years now.
All right.
So I think between like the Tim Ferriss 4 Hour Workweek stuff there,
Yep.
the having a VA and just trying to constantly figure out how to get her to do the things that I need her to do.
Yeah.
Me doing less and less at the
Right.
same time, and then those are two frameworks that I remember going through as well, and I just kind of like chiseled away at it to see like what would work for me. But it's like anything else, right? You just got to get the reps in.
Gotta get the reps in 100%.
Got to get the reps. And this is kind of like
It's
my
just a
view
muscle.
on life in general is,
Mm-hmm.
I think we've talked about this. When you don't know what you're doing,
Yes.
you just need to do stuff.
Hmm.
And you can use courses and lessons and whatever, but advice is never going to be a one-to-one fit.
Right.
And so you use that to help chisel away at what your style is going to end up being. I was
Right.
watching last night actually. I was watching clips of Dave Chappelle getting the
Oh, is it the award that I don't think it's the Tom Sawyer Award, but it's something like that. Yeah. 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 That's right.
yeah, and he was giving his speech about it, and
Yeah.
he talked about how when he was coming up, like he was trying to figure out his style, and like these are the guys that he started copying initially, and he's like any great comic coming up, you kind of look around you or look to your mentors, and you copy their style, right? But it doesn't feel natural yet. The audience doesn't quite vibe with you yet because they know
Yes.
it's you, right?
Right.
And as you get more and more reps and on stage more and more experience, then you start to chisel away at it, and then you eventually find your identity.
Right.
Like, once you're able to get to that point, like that's when things really take off, or took off for him, right?
Yes.
And I find like it's the same here. It's
Hmm.
any skills where it's not like a color by numbers, fill in the blank thing. It's like, all right, let me go find some resources. Let me chisel away at it. Did this work? No, it didn't.
Right.
Maybe this did. All right, let me just keep chiseling away at it until I find the thing and the style that works best for me.
Right. It's that process of chiseling away. Yeah, exactly. It's that process of going through it that like but what's tricky about that and what I found to be daunting at times is like you can obviously doing some search externally and looking for courses or some advice and some mentors obviously is helpful, but when you like to get to that point where you find sort of like, I mean, in the, kind of comic with like Chappelle, it's like finding his authentic true voice. Like that is something that is found internally, which is not like tapping into and tuning into that voice is very, very difficult. But when you get to that place of genuine like authenticity and almost like you feel like you're just being creative and you're operating from like, this is what I do best. It's freeing. Then it becomes fun. Then it's like, oh, I have an innate amount of like confidence in myself to be able to like bring things and just like create magic out of thin air because it's just like I know I have my abilities and I know what I'm good at now. But that doesn't come obviously from the very beginning, but it's like getting over that initial kind of hump, just committing to doing that. And again, without sort of like a vision of what that's going to be. I think the term that you used when we were talking about, I want to get into some books and our love for books a little bit, but the term that you gave me was 1/n, and I can't remember exactly what that meant. But yeah, can you just like expand on that for me a little bit?
So yeah, that is a little maybe like paragraph in Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb.
Yes.
Yeah, there it is. And so what that is a strategy for dealing with uncertainty. And in
Yeah.
particular, he frames it from the side of like trying to get what positive asymmetry, convexity effects is what he calls it. But
Yep.
basically, if you don't, it's the venture capital approach, right? Where if you have a pot of money and you want to try and maximize your upside, you spread your bets as best that you can make, but spread them across as many attempts as possible. That's the N, right? So
Right.
you have one, you spread it over N, as many as N affords you.
Yeah.
So then that gives you the greatest opportunity for
Hmm.
upside in that scenario, right?
Right.
But if we're talking about like learning here, or in this case, like finding your identity, right? It's the same thing about just like getting the reps in and trying things.
Trying.
You have to try as many things as possible in order for you to find it. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, right? They because it's a humbling thing to have to do that.
Yeah.
You do one attempt and you fail, and you have to be okay doing another one, another one.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that's I love about that, just as a general strategy, is because it's so simple.
Yeah.
What it comes down to is just you, right? And I think a lot of stuff in life is much simpler than we make it, but we let like the things on the outside influence us and get into our heads. And so it's, when you start worrying about like what people care and like, oh, like how are they going to think of this? Or, oh man, if this doesn't turn out well, like people are going to laugh at me. Like,
Yeah.
Then it keeps you from doing a strategy like that. But that's the strategy that's ultimately going to get you where you want to go.
Absolutely. It was so fun. I used to always think like, just when at the beginning and be like, this one more opportunity, this one more try, and then I'm going to make it, I'm going to do it. And at this point, I've failed so many times and I've tried so many businesses and tried so many different things that like I've completely lost count. But it's just like what I know and what you and I have talked about, and I feel like I've told you this before, but like I always go back to what I'm doing right now and what I'm working on right now is preparing me for opportunities that don't exist yet, with people that I haven't met yet, with projects that don't even exist yet, and constantly taking that approach at the same sort of thing of just like, I don't know what this looks like, but I'm just going to do it and do it. And then when an opportunity presents itself and you're like, oh, I am uniquely positioned and I've put in all of this work for this one little thing, because it just takes once. Like it takes one person, one opportunity vehicle, whatever that is, to basically change everything. But I totally agree. I think we overcomplicate it, and it's just almost just like we play safe, and like doing that is uncomfortable, and like I gotta pull some band-aids off and it's scary. But like again, without taking that step and doing it, and again, it doesn't need to be as dramatic as I think as a lot of people make it seem to be, is like you just get started. You can get started working a full-time job. Like you don't have to quit everything and tell mom and dad to screw off and like I'm not going to listen to you guys anymore. Like you can get started with, like, again, like we talked about, with such a low barrier of entry of just getting started.
Yeah. And it's applicable to outside of the business world and entrepreneurship too, right? And I forget what the name of Richard Feynman's book is.
Oh, I don't remember.
I don't. But anyways, Richard Feynman's book. I remember. I think it was in that book. I might be misattributing this, but there was an anecdote where he is scared to talk to women, right? And he knows this, and so as as a scientist, scientific mind, he runs an experiment where he just like sits on a bench, and anytime a woman walks by, he like forces himself to talk to that woman.
Yeah.
And he basically did this over and over and over again until he felt comfortable talking to her.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
I maybe completely misattributed that, but the story, the point of the
Stories.
story,
Yeah.
right. And it's the same as like dating, right? It's just like, all right, I don't. You might have this like, I had this picture of like, oh, I like short brunette girls. My wife is blonde now. Like, it's one of those things where you don't know until you put it out there, and your picture might be completely different. And so,
right.
It's the same sort of logic.
Yeah.
Plumbing, right? Is
right.
All right. You don't know what you want, or you think you know what you want. Like, go and find out and figure it out by going on dates and stuff like that.
Wow.
So yeah, that's what it's universal to a degree of like, if you don't know, this is the strategy.
Yes.
And and I can't tell you how frustrating it is to see people who just like sit back and don't do that stuff.
Right.
And put themselves out there.
Right.
And, have the same problems over and over again because they're unwilling to break through the uncomfortableness of deploying the strategy.
Yeah, for sure. Dude, man, that's really good. I want to go back a little bit to, you had brought up that you've had a VA and you've gotten, obviously I know you've come a long way with delegating tasks, but I want to talk about like how, because when you and I like were first getting to know each other and started talking a little bit more, and like you really helped me a lot with like the ability of to get more, like to increase my capacity of work and to increase my output, and not necessarily more time, but just getting better at what I'm doing with the time that is allotted, for the type of projects that I'm working on. But I'm curious to just know like how you structure your days, how you get the most, like how you really show up to do your work. That's just something that I know like you've come a long way with. And so, yeah, if you want to expand on that a little bit, I know there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, no, of course. I think, for me, the formula for personal productivity is, you know, intensity of focus like multiplied by working on the right things. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can work really intensely on the wrong thing,
Right.
or you can work on the right thing, but your attention could be so fragmented you're not making really good progress on it. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And the the working on the right thing is like an exponential multiplier. There's a
Yes.
non-linear effect of working on the right things. Right?
Yes. Right.
So for me, I spend a lot of, I try to spend, my schedule, doesn't afford it as much as I would like, but I try
Mm-hmm.
to spend as much time as I can thinking about what the right things are.
Okay.
And then a lot of that time right now for me is, well, once I've determined what the right things are, a lot of it is, writing up specs or delegating or figuring out how to get the right people or put the right people in place to make those things happen.
Right.
In terms of like a daily schedule, like I am lucky as of the last probably, or unlucky in the last 6 to 12 months to really not get more than, if I get a 2 hour stretch in the middle of the day to work on something,
Dude, yeah.
it's a miracle.
I'm with you. Yeah. I know.
Like if I can get an hour, 30 minutes, like I'm desperately trying to put as much attention and focus into it as I possibly can.
Right.
But also a big focus of mine, which you and I had talked about a long time ago, is how do you minimize the distractions in your life and
Yes.
focus on things more intensely?
This is such a big problem of mine. Yes.
Yeah, and as as I told you, like I'm in the process of building an app to help with this.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Because like you look around and you can like there's so many things vying for your attention.
Always does not stop.
Yeah, your communication channels, Slack and email, like people won't say it, but we all potentially have a mild addiction to social media or
sure.
just technology, right?
Yeah, just
your phone or
the stimulation. Yeah,
that like dopamine hit,
right? Right.
And so I'm constantly scanning my environment to figure out how I can minimize the intrusion of outside focus or outside vying attention, outside external things, I guess, vying for my attention.
Right.
So, turning all notifications off on my devices.
Yeah.
Like freedom to block out time. It's just, it's constant and it's a never ending battle. But I think it's really important, right? I think it's one of those things where, if you spend a time and energy trying to figure out how to minimize your distractions, the productivity you can get out of the time that you're putting into work is, much greater. And that's kind of a big motivator for me. I was telling I have an intern at Lumiverse, and I was telling her the other day because she's in I think like business and finance is her degree. And I was telling her, I was like, I got a friend who's in he's at law school in Chicago. I forget the name of the school, but it's like a direct feeder into the banking system.
Okay. Yep.
His ultimate goal is he wants to get into private equity.
Okay.
And private equity is like, if you get into private, it's very like ruthless, especially that route, right? Very ruthless, cutthroat. It's very difficult to get there, but if you do, like, you're making good money.
Yeah, big money.
Big money. And so I told her, but he got, I think he had an internship at Goldman Sachs, and
okay,
he's putting in like 100-hour weeks and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, told her, I was like, my goal ultimately is to have at the end of my life have more wealth than him, but work 1/4 is my goal,
Yeah.
And so I told her that, and like I say it like kind of jokingly, but like I
no
as my North Star, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like I have a almost 18-month-year-old son, like
yep.
I want to make sure I spend the time with him, and so I artificially put parameters in my day.
Yes.
Right? And so then now, all right, if I'm blocking off these couple hours night and this hour and a half in the morning and this hour and a half in the middle of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not allowed to touch those times with work.
Yep.
Then the question becomes, how do I squeeze the most impact out of the rest of my schedule?
Yes.
And then again, that goes back to working on the right things and
Right.
trying to focus intensely and trying to minimize all the distractions that are going on in my life.
Yeah. Cause like my big thing was, and then you and I talked about this, it was like, I struggle with like, I see like the email badge notification. I'm like, I just got to jump in there and I got to clear it out. And then if like, once my deck is cleared, then I can like focus and I can do it. And like, ever since you and I had that, yeah, go ahead.
I was saying the deck never gets cleared.
It's never stops. No, it never stops. But like, I think there's 2 points here. It's like one, ever since you and I talked about it, and I have just become more conscious and more aware of it, of setting up my own internal system for productivity, what works best for me. I find, and like you and I talk about this all the time, it's just like, I don't feel behind on projects. I feel like I'm like in the groove with things. I got my finger on the pulse. I can like easily sort of like change what's happening like in the moment, because I'm just so ingrained with it, with what's happening. And I just feel more peace as I approach projects, which like to me, again, is just like, that as I've tried to optimize kind of more and more for that, it's just like, how do I want to feel as I'm doing my day to day? Like I want to feel at peace and have the space to be creative and do those sort of things, and not feel like I'm responding or like the world is like trying to steal my time. Like you just can't do it. You got to create those constraints around you. So yeah, man, like that's so powerful. Another thing that I want to talk about with you that we haven't gotten into yet, and I know I want to be respectful of your time, but I want to go back a little bit to like your relationship with money and how your relationship with money has evolved over time. And I know you talked about it like a little bit, like some of your successes, like from the very beginning and sort of stuff like that, but like your ability to like go and like even like have the conversation about getting equity, or like talking to investors and bringing in and like leveraging that capital for like starting the gyms, like that is, to me, is like pretty advanced sort of stuff. Like where was your relationship with money, like even like growing up and sort of like getting started as an entrepreneur, and how has it evolved over time?
Yeah. So, I never understood. It took me a long time to actually understand money. Growing up, we weren't, poor, but I think we were firmly middle class.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here.
Like slightly lower middle class, maybe.
We were house poor, is what my dad used to tell me.
House poor. Okay.
House poor. Yeah.
No, I mean, I remember, again, we weren't poor, but I remember, like we wouldn't be eating the best stuff all the time.
Right.
It was very simple, and be like, hey, why is this meal so small? Like things like that. But again,
Yeah.
like, we were fine, well off, like
Yeah.
And I think part of that was I went to private school, so part of it is you spend money on you're poor based on the amount of money that you have at the end of the month.
Right. It's the ratio. Yeah. Yes.
No matter what, how much money you make, it's what you keep at the end of the month.
Bingo. Yes.
So there might have been things that we were spending as a family, spending money on that we should not have been spending money.
Right.
We should have been spending. We prioritize things over others. Right.
Bingo. Yes.
Yeah. So and I always worked. It was always like dog sitting growing up. So I understand. I remember like picking weeds in a garden for a neighbor. Like, so I was always, and I think my parents made sure like we understood. Like, hey, we're not an ATM. Like, you got to go work.
Right.
Like, I understood that. But I think where going to college, I went to McDaniel, and it's a very expensive school.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand debt, didn't understand student loan, anything. And I just signed some stuff, and a couple years later realized I'm like 70K underwater. And
gosh.
And I think it's a travesty to not teach kids about that.
Right.
I don't know whose fault that is, but like it's almost criminal to have an 18-year-old sign in something that puts so much debt on their head.
Yeah.
And puts them behind.
Right.
Just
from the jump. Yeah.
So I didn't know enough about that at the time. And so
for sure,
me, that's something, I want to make sure that my kids understand, especially debt, and the role that debt should or shouldn't play in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like I said, it took me a really long time. I always knew about the trying to make money side and like working really hard, had jobs, like trying to go at the entrepreneurial thing, but I didn't understand it's what you keep at the end of the day.
Right. Right.
So it just felt like I was trying to fill a bucket with, bucket with
holes. Yeah.
fill it with sand and it's all coming out the bottom.
Yeah, 100%.
And it compounded because I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is one of the more affluent places in the world. Not Orange County affluent, but we're up there. And so you look around and it's a keeping up with the Joneses situation.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So I think it wasn't until I decided to just not care about keeping up with the Joneses.
Ah.
I really started to understand money and start coming into my own in terms of being able to make and keep money.
Got it.
Right. So let me see. So like with the equity piece, right? Like a lot of it was just out of necessity,
All right.
I think I had like an intuition again of, debt is going to put me in a more risky situation.
Yeah.
So, the conversation with equity, I part of it was I was just lucky to have, somebody who was willing to have like respected me enough to have a candid conversation with me about it. And like I said, you might have slid a couple things under where it's like, all right, this was actually a better deal than I thought it was.
Yeah, right.
But again, it would have been the same no matter what. But again, I was lucky to have somebody who was, I remember like sitting at this dude's place at like midnight on a Tuesday, and we were just going line by line through the operating agreement.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And what does this mean? What does this mean?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Like going through that.
Right.
So that was just a great lesson. And again, I was lucky that I didn't have somebody who, came and completely took me to the cleaners.
Yeah.
And I think it was just lucky that I had a mentor there. But I was still not making a ton of money at that time.
Right.
I think for me, I'm a you have to learn your lesson kind of guy before it really sinks in.
Right.
And so, I think it was like right before I sold the gyms, like I'm not making a ton of money. The gym is making a ton of money, but I'm not making the money that I want to make for this area.
100%.
Right. And so then it was like we got to the point, and then I had this opportunity to sell, but I experienced this where it was like, man, like things are squeezing, they feel really tight, and I don't like it at all.
Yeah.
And so then when I sold the gym and got this nice big check,
right.
I was like, we gotta do things a little different. We don't want this to happen.
I'm not going back to this. Yeah.
And so at that point, what I ended up doing is, I made it a huge priority to pay off all of my debt.
All right.
So, for the next, 2-3 years, like, I'd met my wife at the time. We've been dating for like 4 months, 5 months. Decided to move in together.
Superstar. Shout out Josie.
Part of it was love. Part of it was we wanted to save a bunch of money, so we moved together. Yeah. And then we started she had student loan debt. I had student.
Okay.
Loan. I had credit card debt from opening the gyms.
Of course.
Right. Like debt is not good.
Yes.
Not a good position to be in.
Right.
So we really just focused on, let's get this thing paid off as quickly as we possibly can.
Got it. Okay.
Big focus for us for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And then, at that point, once you get to that point where you don't have debt, it's kind of like a breath of fresh air.
Right. Yeah. You can focus on just like stacking ownership, owning assets. Yeah.
You start having money in the bank to do stuff with.
Right.
You can go start like investing in businesses, and getting stuff off the ground, having vehicles that throw cash back at you.
Right.
It all starts with, and I was like, if there's any takeaway, I was thinking about this before we hopped on.
Yeah.
If there's any takeaway that your listeners would want to have, it's just that, like, you have to stay in the game. You have to make sure that you aren't carrying debt, because it doesn't matter how much you have if you owe somebody else an equivalent amount of money. Right. And debt is a tool to use.
Right.
To typically on the business side, like I'm very strongly opposed to commercial debt. I'm very leery, and people will disagree with me on this. I'm very leery about getting a mortgage, depending on how much cash you have on hand.
Right.
And realtors and people will disagree with that statement and whatever. Right.
Fine.
But I think at the end of the day, it's just a matter. Again, like for me, it's if you take on debt, you need to be very thoughtful about what it is you're taking on and what potential risk you're putting yourself at.
Yes.
It's going to cause you to, because debt is a positive feedback loop, right? You take on a little bit of debt, you take on a little bit more debt. This thing popped up, you got to take on a little bit more.
Yeah.
Besides paying down the stuff or off the stuff you already have.
Right.
Then it's going to cycle over and over again. And I can give a pretty firm example of that. Like there was, when I still had debt, there were, surprise expenses, medical expenses, or, like car accidents or something that would pop up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have the cash, then you have to take more debt and to pay off that.
Using debt to pay for more debt. Yeah.
Debt, right?
Ay, ay, ay.
So then, like nowadays, if we have, medical emergency, like we had a baby, right? You get slapped with a 10K hospital bill. So, yeah. But then you just pay it off in cash, right?
Right.
And now you don't have to worry about it, and it's not hanging over your head. And
yeah,
a 10K bill, but like, cool, like I don't have to worry about it anymore. And we had the cash on hand to do it, and
right.
It didn't sting in our overall, financial plan. So
yes,
our thumb, it didn't collapse our overall.
Right.
So, and it's just a much stronger position to be in.
Right.
And I just strongly urge you to not necessarily worry about pushing the upper limits of your income and trying to get to that next level until you have, that taken care of, right? Debt on your hand or minimal debt, right? That serves a purpose,
right?
And you have your lifestyle under control, because
wow.
you're going to hit a ceiling much quicker, and you're going to be very lucky. It's a recipe to not get to your ultimate goals if that's your base that you're working off of.
Big time. Yeah. I mean, it's like I've experienced it. Like it's difficult to prioritize or to like be tuned in to like be creative, like what's happening like in this, if you're thinking about like almost just like what's bogging you down, like it feels like the level of water is like right there, and you're like, I just can't quite get your breath. And I think using or viewing debt as this is like basically cash, like having access to the capital is great, and I think it serves a purpose for sure, but using it or having them frame of mind of like, I'm going to treat this as cash and I'm not going to let this stack up and continue to stack up on me over time is huge. I know we're at the top of the hour, so I just want to ask one more question before we jump. Yeah. If you were to give advice to your 25-year-old self, what would you go back and tell that sweet, handsome Rob?
I would tell him, he needed to start living within his means much quicker.
Dude, yeah, huge.
I think I was at that time, I had just opened the gym,
mm-hmm.
And I was still like going out and partying and drinking, and like you spend a lot more money than you doing that stuff,
right?
And so I would just say like that set me, that delayed getting to the next level for me,
right?
To go,
right.
And I think if I had to do it over again, like I would have made sure that and I had people around me, like I said, living in the area that I live in, like when everybody else is spending money left and right, and you also can't see whether they're putting it on credit cards, or like you don't know what their financial situation is, right?
Right.
I was actually having this conversation a few days ago where it's like, I found out somebody that I know who like spends money like crazy, who I thought had more money than they did. They're heavily in debt.
Got it.
But like from the outside in, you just see this person who's spending all of this money, and you're like,
right.
Man, you must be doing well.
Yeah.
You find out that like, oh no, they have a lot of debt.
Yes.
It changes your perception of it, but
right.
It's like where it's like you don't know, so just assume. Like this is my mindset. Assume everybody is just is trying to floss, right?
Right.
Trying to put on the show and
right.
don't have their house in order.
Yes, I love that.
To have, because then the ego side of you is like, I don't care that they're spending money over here. My bank account is debt free.
Yes,
I probably have a better cash to debt ratio than they do.
Right.
Like, that's the metric that you optimize for is the most important thing.
Right? Yeah, dude, that's beautiful.
I'm optimizing for, and if I have to pretend like I have no idea what their situations are,
right?
If I pretend like I'm better than them, then guess me where I gotta go.
For sure. Well, there's two takeaways there that I want to just harp on a little bit. Is like the same way that we set constraints for our time, right? Like time blocking and setting that constraint. It's the same sort of thing with your finances, like setting a budget or locking that in or identifying it. And again, like having your finger on the pulse. Cause again, like there's no like cap to the amount of money you can spend. Like I could spend it infinitely. So if I don't set the constraint for myself, then like I have no metric to work against. That's a big one for me. I've always operated with like, I'm going to live off of X amount of money a month. And like, that's the way that I just set that constraint and I work against it. And the other one is sort of like the feeling of, how can I articulate this? Like what I like about the vision of like building wealth for me, I've always viewed it as like digging roots of a tree, and like what like your bank accounts, your assets, like your structure are the deep roots that are invisible to everybody. Nobody can see that stuff, but that's what makes you strong. So like that tree that starts to grow, like if that's built on a not a strong foundation and it gets struck by lightning or like a medical emergency or something, that we don't know, like that tree is just going to topple right over. That's not what I want to do. So maybe like, yeah, to the outside world, people can't necessarily look in and see like what, maybe to like, I'm not, maybe I don't have the nicest clothes or the nicest house or the nicest car, but like I'm strong and sturdy and structured. Like I'm not going anywhere. Like I can handle everything that's coming at me. Like that to me gives me peace. It gives me freedom. It gives me harmony in my life that like I can't put a price on that anyway. So like that's huge, man. That's really good advice. Seriously, thank you so much. That's awesome.
And I think just to kind of tie a bow
Yeah,
on it,
please.
it goes back to what I was saying earlier, like, about the 1/n strategy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This stuff, ultimately, I believe like the strategies for life are not that terribly complicated.
Right. Yes.
The complicated thing is how you deal with the environment around you. And
right.
So, you got to take care of yourself, and you got to make sure you're in a good situation, because, if I want to test out different things, I need to be comfortable with failure and be okay with how other people may or may not perceive me, right?
Right.
And if I want to, save money and build a strong foundation, I need to be comfortable not being the one who's spending out most money or saying no to things. And then other people being like, why did you say no to that? Right.
Right.
Or like, I remember, hanging out with some people back in my mid-20s, and they would just be like, oh, just put it on the credit card. It's fine. This is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I'm like, that doesn't seem like a system.
Right.
Right. So like, but it's tough. Those things are tough.
Yes.
Tough to do those. So you
right.
got to make sure right in your head and where you're at in life in order to then put these very easy strategies into practice.
Right.
Things are the things that like are going to get you where you need to go.
Dude, I love that.
So many people can't get to where they want to.
Yes. I think the saying is like, you make the hard decision now, it's easier like later on. You make the easy decision now, it's going to be harder later on in life. But it's the same thing with like how you like approaching like food that I'm going to eat. Like if I make the easy decision to like, eat some fast food right now, like I'm ultimately going to pay for that decision. But like I don't necessarily want to eat the meat and the rice, but like that's what I'm building like the foundation on. It's going to make I'm not going to have to worry about spending money on hospital complications when I'm older, spending my time in a hospital bed. Like I'm going to take care of that stuff now. Yeah. Dude, that's beautiful. And again, that applies to like all different areas of our lives. Yeah. That's huge. Rob, you're a superstar. Thank you so much. Again, I want to say thank you for the impact you've had on me, the way that you have stretched what I felt like is possible. I just love your approach to life in general. There's so much more that you and I need to talk about, and I want to have you back 100% to talk about our love for our books and all that stuff. So again, appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Everybody, appreciate you guys spending some time with us today. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure you like and comment and subscribe. If you're listening on a podcast platform, don't forget to leave us a review and share it with somebody. We want to put this information out there for as many people as possible. And again, Rob, appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I will see you guys all in the next episode.
All right.